Well, as I sit here joined by Eric Engels out of Montreal, I must say, Eric, it's an interesting choice of artwork behind you. I'm sure Habs fans will absolutely love it, and the odd Leaf fan that tunes into this chat might have a few questions. Take us through what are we looking at behind us here?
Well, my wife, Phelan, she painted this 10 years ago. I asked her to paint me something hockey related, and I did not choose what it was. She just made this. So it's all coincidental. I can't believe it, Shawn. It's November. We're taking some time off watching golf to talk hockey.
Yeah, and that painting's fitting because we're going to dive in a little deeper into the Montreal Canadiens, and it feels like a long time ago that we were sitting at Scotiabank Arena watching some bubble hockey, watching the Montreal Canadiens make a thrilling, unexpected run. And we saw a lot of guys really elevate their game. The guys that you expected to be good, the Carey Prices, the Brendan Gallaghers, they were outstanding. But there was a handful of guys that really kind of made a name for themselves. And I think maybe surprised some people, including Nick Suzuki, who arguably was maybe one of the most dominant Canadians and a real breakout role. So just what are the expectations for him now, and just how much was that a message sent?
Yeah, you know what? That's kind of the most vital question after all these changes that have gone through in Montreal is, will Nick Suzuki take off on the same step that he left off on? And it was an impressive one. And you say he definitely surprised a lot of people, and I agree he did. I wasn't one of them. I just felt, this is a kid that showed a lot in his rookie season. He was in the mix for Rookie of the Year, albeit obviously a long shot with the two defensemen and Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes showing what they did. And obviously what Victor Olofsson did in Buffalo was tremendous. But it's been a slow burn with Nick Suzuki. They brought him along gradually. They sent him back to junior for an extra year. He dominated at that level and came back and showed what he was all about in his rookie season. He got some great opportunities. He started, people will forget this, last season, he started on the fourth line and on the wing with Nate Thompson playing center, and quickly moved his way up the lineup and ended up displacing Max Domi as a first line center. So here's a player with a lot of promise. And I people worry about the sophomore slump, and I'll agree it's a possibility with any player that's coming into their sophomore season. But I just think all the layoffs and the extra time to get himself into the proper shape, and the note that he left off on, I really see a player that I think could be a point per game player, especially with the players he's going to be playing with. And I would also say that Nick Suzuki is not all about offense, and that's not necessarily the way to gauge his game in terms of success or failure. I think he's going to put up his points, but what he does on the defensive end impressed me the most in the bubble, and I think that's where he takes a big step this season.
Now, you mentioned slumps, and one guy that went through a bit of a tough stretch is Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and I think many people wondered, what would he be? Would he ever get back to the level that the expectations were at? And he did that, much like Nick Suzuki during that playoff run, just outstanding and seemed to show up every single night. So were you surprised that after everything he went through, he had that performance, or was that there all along?
I was shocked. When he came back to phase 3 training camp, I saw him on the outside of the roster looking in, and it was understandable. At the time that he was sent down to Laval through this struggling sophomore injury-plagued season, it was the mentality was kind of like, they're sending him down there, and maybe it might be good for him to spend an entire year there. He took that time off in between the season being paused and the opportunity to come back to training camp as a real opportunity to prove that he's every bit the player that the Canadiens drafted third overall in 2018. And, the one thing that impressed me the most with Kotkaniemi in the playoffs was the physical nature of his play. That created a lot of room for him to do what he does best, which is control the puck and make plays. But all of that said, that was 10 games. It was a 10-game sample. He didn't have the type of consistency that Nick Suzuki did, where you would believe that there's a linear kind of path going through here. So for Kotkaniemi, it's going to be up to him to prove what he can do this season. He's obviously going to be a little bit less sheltered and get a little bit more opportunity. And because of the depth of the forward group with Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli coming in, he's going to be playing with better players on a night-to-night basis. So he's going to have to bring it. He's going to have to prove that he's still on that level and continuing to grow. And maybe he'll take a step back and 2 forward. Maybe he'll continuously take a few forward baby steps. One way or another, this is a player that is pivotal for the Montreal Canadiens, and so they expect that he's going to have a big year.
So you mentioned the new additions. We talked about guys like Suzuki and Kotkaniemi having a little bit of a breakout and really locking down their role and establishing themselves more. What does that mean for a guy like Phillip Danault?
People might think that it'll diminish his role. I don't see his role diminishing very much. We're talking about a top 10 player in the league in terms of the quality of competition he faces, meaning he faces the toughest competition, and there aren't 10 other players in the league who face tougher competition on a night-to-night basis. And no matter how well Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi are playing, a lot of those responsibilities are still going to fall to Danault. And I would also say that, yes, he's been a huge 5-on-5 producer for the Canadiens, playing great on that line with Brendan Gallagher and Thomas Tatar. And I think that line will remain intact, at least until there's some issues and they have to move things around and generate some offense because they get into a slump like happens every season. But I would say that Phillip Danault might get freed up to produce a little bit more offense with those other two guys taking on a bit more. So, it's amazing how far we've come. You go back 25 to 30 years up until now, we've been talking about this weak center line of the Montreal Canadiens being their biggest pitfall, and all of a sudden we're talking about a problem on how to distribute the ice time between three really quality centers. And Jake Evans is right behind those other three guys as a guy who's 23, 24 years old, on his way up, and is going to be a very reliable fourth-line center. And Ryan Poehling is in that mix. So what a big change. But Phillip Danault, that role, that people are talking about, and Suzuki and Kotkaniemi are going to eat into it, I wouldn't rush to that conclusion.
So with all that being said, Marc Bergevin in this offseason was handing out contracts left, right, and center. The wallets were open. Why nothing for Danault?
I think it just makes sense for Bergevin to wait on this. He needs to see what he has in Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. I think that picture is going to become a lot clearer. On Danault's side of things, yeah, you'd like to have a contract settled before the season starts, but at the end of the day, Phillip Danault is going to get fair value, whether it's with the Montreal Canadiens or another team. So he can't be panicking about that situation. And also, I think the financials around the NHL only stand to improve as we get closer to the possibility of having a vaccine and returning to normalcy. And I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying. We're not there yet, and it's hard to envision. But the situation, is dire for now, and we're looking at a locked up salary cap for at least the next season. But beyond that, we might be able to project once we get closer to a vaccine and we get closer to safety parameters that will allow us to return to a type of normalcy, about revenues increasing with a new TV deal coming to the NHL on the American side, and with the groundswell of optimism from fans who will miss this game and want to return to watching it live and in person. So I think there's incentives on both sides to wait. I don't think it's a panic situation for Montreal fans who are saying, wow, all these contracts were handed out. How come Phillip Danault doesn't have one yet? Let's see what develops, because at the end of the day, he's going to get what he deserves to be paid, I believe. And I think the Montreal Canadiens are hoping it's with them.
Well, Eric, we love the insight. Habs fans will love that little piece of art behind you. Thanks for taking the time and doing this.
It's my pleasure.